anxiety by looking at it as having to get through it instead of living in it.
Okay.
Be here now. The journey is the thing. Whatever happens is what's supposed to happen. How you respond to it determines the effect it has on your life. Remember, nothing has built-in meaning. Nothing has built-in meaning. Everything is neutral. You supply the meaning you've been taught to supply it with, and the meaning you supply it with determines the effect you get out of the situation. So if you find that you're anxious, you are supplying a meaning that is, by definition, generating anxiety. If you don't prefer that, supply a definition to what's happening that will allow you to extract only beneficial experiences from it, no matter what anyone else may be experiencing in the very same event.
Spread love, man.
All right, so today we're diving into something that I think a lot of our listeners probably think about pretty often, and that's anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety.
But instead of thinking about it like an enemy to be conquered, what if we looked at it more as like a signal, almost like an internal heads up? So if you're the kind of person who likes to get to the root of things, really build a deep understanding, then this one's for you, because we're going to explore what's really going on with anxiety and how you can actually shift how you relate to it.
Totally. And in this deep dive, we really want to unpack the nature of anxiety based on everything we've been looking at.
Yeah.
Understanding where it comes from and offering you a new perspective on it. And one of the biggest ideas that kind of jumps out is this idea that like nothing has any meaning built in.
Right.
It's all neutral.
Yeah.
Right. You supply the meaning. And that's something to keep in mind as we go through this and see how that applies to your experience of anxiety.
Exactly. We're going to focus on two key areas here. First, how we actually create a lot of our own anxiety. And second, the subtle influence of what we're calling these external vibrations.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right into how anxiety can actually be a meaning that you're personally assigning to things.
This is where that core concept we just talked about becomes so important.
Yeah.
The material we've been looking at says straight up, if you find that you're anxious, you are supplying a meaning that is by definition generating anxiety. Just let that sink in for a second.
Right.
It's not the situation itself, it's how you're choosing to interpret it that's creating that anxious feeling.
And what's really empowering here is that you have a choice.
Right.
The material emphasizes that you can select what meaning you prefer to give to the situation, so that regardless of the other person's intention in the event, you will only experience a positive and beneficial result based on the meaning you have supplied.
Wow.
That's huge, right?
That is huge.
It suggests that we're not just like victims of circumstance. We can actually shape our experience.
Absolutely. And, to illustrate this point, there's a really good analogy about orange socks.
Okay.
Imagine someone's criticizing your orange socks.
Okay.
But you're clearly wearing white socks.
Right.
You probably just think they're mistaken.
Yeah.
Their negative comment, their vibration wouldn't really affect you because it doesn't match your reality.
It doesn't stick.
Right. You're wearing white socks, so you don't resonate with that criticism.
Now, contrast that with someone calling you stupid.
Ooh, yeah.
That often hits a nerve.
It does.
Right.
Well, as the source points out, we've been conditioned to give that word a lot of meaning.
Right.
There's all this baggage attached to it.
Yeah, totally.
So we react almost automatically.
And so the takeaway here, especially if you're someone who's dealing with a lot of information all the time, is that how you react to that information, the meaning you give it.
Right.
That's what determines whether it feels overwhelming or not.
100%. And this leads us to the next step.
Okay.
Owning and understanding your anxiety. The source is very clear about this. You must own it because you cannot change what you do not own.
Right.
Don't ignore it.
He'll deny it.
Don't deny it.
Right.
Instead of pushing it away or feeling bad about it,
Yeah.
you need to move towards it.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does.
But there's some really insightful reasoning behind it.
Absolutely.
The material suggests that anxiety actually has a purpose.
Okay.
It says that anxiety puts you in touch with the fact that you have a definition that doesn't work for you.
Interesting.
So it's like an internal alarm system that's going off, saying, hey, something's not quite right here.
Interesting.
There's a mismatch between your beliefs and how you're seeing the situation.
Yeah, and that's where the real potential for change comes in.
Okay.
Because the source even says, and that's how you instantly turn anxiety into excitement. Wow. Now that might sound a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But the idea is fascinating. It explains that you have this fundamental energy, your own vibration.
Okay.
And when you filter that energy through belief systems that don't align with who you really are,
Yeah.
you experience it as fear or anxiety.
Okay.
But when you filter that same energy through beliefs that are in alignment with your true self,
Yeah.
it shows up as joy and excitement.
Wow. So it's the same energy just being interpreted differently
Exactly.
based on these filters you have.
Right.
So the feeling of anxiety isn't inherently bad.
No.
It's just your energy being channeled through a certain lens.
And the source actually calls it a beneficial tool to let you know when you're holding on to a belief that doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
It's like a notification saying, hey, something's off here. Let's take a look.
Mm-hmm.
So the process then becomes acknowledge it, accept it's there, and then really dive into why it's there.
Right.
What beliefs or meanings are you attaching to this situation that are causing this feeling?
Okay.
And by exploring that, you can start to shift those beliefs.
Now, this ties in really well with how we understand motivation, which is what we'll look at next.
Absolutely.
The source argues that all of our motivations boil down to one thing:
Okay.
seeking pleasure and avoiding pain.
Interesting.
And this is where it can seem a bit paradoxical.
Right.
We all make choices that seem difficult or even painful.
We do.
But the source says that even in those cases, you have a belief system within you that is actually labeling the painful thing as more pleasurable than the so-called pleasurable one for some reason.
Wow.
So on some level, there's a perceived benefit even in the discomfort.
Right.
Think about someone who stays in a job they hate.
Yeah.
From the outside, it looks like they're choosing to be unhappy,
Right.
but maybe they actually find more pleasure in the perceived security of that job,
Hmm.
or they're avoiding the fear of the unknown that comes with leaving.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So the key then is to figure out what those underlying definitions and attachments are.
Right.
When you understand why you might be choosing something that seems less beneficial,
Yeah.
you can start to let go of those limiting definitions.
And then what happens?
Well, then you naturally start making choices that are more aligned with what truly brings you pleasure and well-being,
Because,
because you're assigning more beneficial meanings to them.
right, it's not about forcing it. It's a natural progression.
So just to recap, we've seen that anxiety isn't some outside force.
Yeah.
It's often a meaning that we create ourselves based on how we interpret things.
Right.
And by owning that feeling, understanding that it's pointing us towards beliefs that might not be working for us anymore, we can actually transform it.
Interesting.
And we also saw that even our tough or painful choices are often driven by a deeper desire for what we believe is pleasurable.
Based on those meanings that we assign.
Exactly.
Wow.
So what this all boils down to is that you have a lot more power over your experience of anxiety than you might think.
It's not something you just have to endure.
Right.
It's a valuable signal that can guide you towards a more fulfilling experience.
If you understand it.
Exactly.
And that starts by looking at the meanings you're giving to things.
Right.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
Remember a time recently when you felt anxious. What meaning did you give to that situation?
Yeah.
And now knowing what we've discussed, what's a different, more beneficial meaning you could choose to give it?
That's a good question.
It's all about self-discovery.
Yeah.
And it starts with questioning how you're interpreting things.
That's powerful.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.